Alright, so I want to talk a little bit about SELinux today. So SELinux is a security implementation that just adds more layers of security to the Linux operating system, and it does so by implementing context to files, users, objects, processes, ports, and services, pretty much everything that runs on the Linux operating system. So to know whether the SELinux security is active on your system, you just need to do get enforce. Okay, so mine is currently set to permissive, so that means SELinux will not stop anything that is supposed to stop if it was on. However, it's going to send a warning message if something illegal happens. Okay, so to turn it back on, I can just do set enforce and do a 1. And now if I do get enforce again, it is enforcing. Okay, so there is a configuration file for SELinux. So that is the configuration file for SELinux. You can see that SELinux can either have one of 3 states or values, and the current value according to from the configuration file is enforcing. And there are 3 types of SELinux: targeted, minimum, or MLS. And the default type of SELinux is always targeted. Okay, so you can use the set enforce tool to change the state of your SELinux, but that will only be for that session. If you wanted the change to be permanent, then you have to VI into this file and manually change this value and set it to whatever value you want to set among these 3 values right here. Okay, so SELinux basically labels files according to what users and what services need to be able to access those files, and it does same for ports and processes. So for example, I have set up Apache web server on this machine. So if I long list the document root and add in a Z option to the command var www html. Okay, so this is the user context, the role context, and the type context. Okay, so httpd://sys_content means that the content in this directory is content that should have the ability to be accessed by the httpd daemon, which is the daemon that runs up web services. Okay, so I'm going to do 2 things right now. First of all, let me check my SELinux. So currently it is enforcing. So I'm just going to move into the document root of my HTTPD service. Okay. If I long list the content, there is nothing there. So I will do I will copy the host file to this location. Okay, so we have the host file right here now, and I will just rename it to index.html. Okay, so if I check the file context of this file that we have copied from somewhere and renamed, okay, so we see that it has the same context, the same SELinux context as this directory, which means that this file should be accessible through a web browser right now if the HTTPD service is running, and I know that it's running, so because I configured it before. So if I just refresh this page, we see immediately the content of that file, which means that if that file contained a website, we should see the website right here, right now. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to delete that file. Okay, and exit out of the directory. Now I'm going to copy the host file to the root directory, to the root directory of my root user. So now I have a host file right here. So now I'm going to copy this file. No, not copy. This time around I want to move the host file into var www html, and I want to rename it index.html. Oh, sorry about that. var. Okay, so that has been done. So I will just move into the directory and if I list the content, I have an index.html file right there. So if I check the SELinux file context for that file, you can see that the type of the security, the SELinux type for this file is not right. This should be httpd _c _content, so this is not correct, which means that even though it has the read-write permission and it is in the root directory of a website, if I go to a web browser, I see the default website. That file is not available. SELinux is preventing me from viewing that file through the web because it doesn't have the right context for that directory. So how can you fix this situation? The way to fix this is I will list the context for the directory. Okay, let me just add D to indicate that it's a directory. Okay, so this is the correct content that we should have right there. So I'll just copy it and I will do se manage file context, add, I want to add a file context. I want to add a SELinux file context to this index.html file. So I want to add the type of context I want to add is what I just copied something else. So let me just copy this. Okay, and paste. And I want to add it for this file .html. Okay, it takes a little bit of time in order to do it, and then that has been added, but it's not being implemented yet. In order for that file context to take effect, we need to do a restore con. I will make it verbose and force it index.html. Okay, you can see it has been relabeled. Relabel this file from this to that. So if we list the context again of that file, it now has the right context for this directory. And if you go to a web browser now, it is now accessible because SELinux is now allowing it to be viewed because it has the right context for the directory that it is in. Okay, so another thing about SELinux is ports. Okay, so the default port for HTTPD is port 80. There are other ports that SELinux has already configured that can be used for HTTPD by putting them in the configuration file for HTTPD and setting them as listening ports in the configuration file of HTTPD. And if you try to use any port that has not been recognized by SELinux as a potential port that can be used for HTTP, SELinux is gonna block it. So in order to list the pre-configured ports that can be used for HTTPD, we do SEmanage ports, and then we list. So this will list all the ports that have been pre-configured to be allowed for different services by SELinux. However, we only want to see those that have to do with HTTP. So we grab that. What is I do? Oh, yeah. SELinux port, not ports, please. Okay, so you can see HTTPD underscore port underscore T. TCP is the protocol. So if you go to the configuration file for HTTPD, these are the ports that you can set as listening ports. And in order not to have something to do with SELinux, if you set any other port out of this, then you have to modify SELinux to allow that port. So for example, I'm going to add port 82 to this list. So in order to add port 82 or any other port that is not among these, you do SEmanage port -A for addition, -T for the type. So I will copy this type. That is the type we want to add. And -P, the protocol that we want to add is TCP. And the port is 82. So I will hit enter. It's adding the port to that list. The reason you may want to do this is because many people already know that HTTPD uses these ports. So if somebody was trying to get into your system illegally, these are the ports using HTTP. These are the ports they will be trying out. So if you can modify SELinux to allow a port that is not in this list, then that gives you an additional layer of security for your network. So if I verify again the ports, now I have 82 added. Okay, so at this point I can go into the configuration file for my Apache server and set it to listen on port 82. All right, thank you for watching and stay blessed.